Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murder 3. Strange things that happen here. How stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree?
Coffee. Without it, we would never have had the Industrial Revolution. We'd all be still living in Europe in mud huts. Here in Laredo, we have the Organic Man Coffee Trike. 4501 McPherson, the best coffee on the planet. If you can't get to Laredo, you can order from the Organic Man Coffee Trike.shop. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Chris James. Great Britain is in first place, followed by Australia and Canada coming in third. All the rest of the countries are just kind of vying for fourth place. Russia, China, Bolivia, all kinds of countries that I'm really surprised to see are listening. Back when I first started doing this podcast, I tried reading a few of my books to entertain my listeners. I discovered real quick this was using up my data on Podomatic. They don't run commercials, so I was having to pay for storage. I ran out of storage real quick, so I had to delete the books that I had read. Here recently, my wife suggested I do the book readings once again. iHeartRadio and YouTube aren't charging for storage. I have created a new channel on YouTube called Storytime with Chris James. I'm going to read all of the Bag Company books. I currently have 8 books and I'm working on number 9. The story is about a young girl who has to go to work because her parents have decided they want to get out of debt. She has no experience, and so they send her to work for her uncle, not knowing what he does for a living. He runs a company of a bunch of people. They're psychics and card readers and scryers and all kinds of psychic people. Of course, she doesn't believe in any of that stuff because it's just too weird. And as the story goes along, she discovers that she is psychic. I'm not going to ruin the story for you, so you can go back and listen to it instead. But check it out. You can find it on iHeartRadio, on YouTube, on my Strange Things channel, or on the new channel, Storytime. I also put the books on the different platforms because some people aren't going to want to go searching for a new one to listen to. Polybius was a Greek historian of the Hellenistic period. He's noted for his work, The Histories, which covered the period from 264 to 146 BC and the Punic Wars. He went into a lot of detail. Polybius is important for his analysis of the mixed constitution or the separation of powers in government. His in-depth discussion of checks and balances to limit power, and his introduction of the people, which influenced a lot of the laws that were written in various countries as time went by, including our Constitution. They referred back to Polybius while writing the Constitution. I'm not going to talk about him, though. When I had Christopher Garetano on the show, we had Polybius incident on the schedule, but we ran out of time. I thought about inviting him to record another show, but, well, he's a busy man, and he's got things to do besides talk to me. So instead, I'll just go over the story myself. When I was growing up, the pinball machine was the only game out there. It took some skill, but a whole lot of luck. They took out the pins a long time ago. The movie Tommy came out, drawing even more attention to playing the tables. They were big and they took up a lot of room, so the only place you would find them were bars and arcades. As computers got smaller and cheaper, the manufacturers wanted to attract more people to the idea of buying their own personal computer. Some geek came up with the idea of putting games on computers so younger folks would be more inclined to look into them. Tennis was the first game that came out. You hooked the computer to the TV and two people could play each other. If they left the game on too long, it would burn an image into your TV screen. The graphics were something out of a kindergarten, but it was considered way cool back then. Slowly the graphics improved as computers' abilities to create them advanced. Processor speed went up almost on a daily basis. The CIA has had an interest in every detail of our daily lives, almost to the point of obsession. Big Brother was getting better at keeping an eye on us so we wouldn't discover what they were doing that could land them in jail. The CIA was created in 1947, and right away they began breaking laws and violating their mandate. Operation Paperclip was a direct violation of a presidential order, and the president was their boss. In the 50s and 60s, during the Cold War, the CIA conducted numerous secret chemical experiments on major cities throughout the United States. These experiments, including spraying impoverished areas of St. Louis with zinc-cadmium sulfide, which is a chemical powder that is able to be tracked after it's been dispersed. The chemicals were released by motorized blowers that were situated on top of buildings. Recent studies have shown that high amounts of exposure to cadmium can cause bone and kidney problems as well as lung cancer. Operation Northwoods was a proposed false flag operation against American citizens that originated with the United States Department of Defense, the U.S. government, and the CIA back in 1962. The idea was that CIA operatives would stage and actually commit acts of violence and terrorism against American military and civilian targets, blaming all of this on the Cuban government. They were going to use this as justification for invading Cuba. When Allen Dulles became the first civilian head of the CIA in 1953, he initiated a program looking into brainwashing, mind control, ways of creating soldiers that would do anything and then forget what they had done. MK Ultra was the name given to parts of this project. They also had the Montauk Project and probably dozens of other unnamed operations, since everything they did was top secret. It was all for the good of our country. It was for our best interests. Well, that's what they said to assuage their consciences. How do you go about creating a person who will do anything they are told without bringing attention onto yourself? There are a lot of ideas coming from a lot of different people who are all convinced they know the right way to do it. Some were looking into mind control because they were convinced this could help all of mankind. It would fix any mental problems and do away with crime. It's for our own good, you know. Others were in it simply for the money. The CIA handed out bags full of cash to anyone with a possible means of mind control. One way was to torture young kids until their minds fractured, then slowly rebuild it into the mind of a controllable madman. Others used drugs. LSD was first created to use as a way of interrogating enemy prisoners. Experiments were conducted to see if LSD could be used to brainwash someone. Some people went mad while others died. This was also done for our own good. As computers became faster and more efficient, someone in the back room of the CIA came up with the idea of trying a computer program to do the dirty deeds. How do you get people in front of a computer and keep them there long enough to reprogram their brains? This brought on the idea of using computer games. October 1981, Bobby Fieldstein disappeared from his home in the suburbs of Portland, Oregon. Earlier in the day, he'd been playing a video game at Coin Kingdom, an arcade in the city. As he played through the day, his mind began to wander and all kinds of uninvited thoughts entered. He became confused. He felt sick from time to time. Eventually, Bobby made his way back home. The weird images and thoughts stuck with him after he got there. There was a knock at the door. A group, we don't know how many men, barged into the house and grabbed him. Bobby tried to scream, but he said his vocal cords refused to cooperate. He tried to fight, but his body acted as if he was no longer in charge of it. Then he passed out. When Bobby awoke, he was strapped down to a table. He had no idea where he was, how long he'd been there, or how he got there. He found he could move just a bit. His body was now responding to his wishes, but the restraints were too strong. All Bobby could do was lay there and wait. Someone was coming towards him in the gloom. The sound of unsteady footsteps were soon right next to him. A boy about the same age, only in really bad shape, was standing next to the table. This unknown kid looked as if he'd been mistreated, and for a long time. Bobby didn't recognize this newcomer, but he pleaded to be released. The other boy undid the restraints. They took off at a fast pace, looking for a way out of this place. As they went, sounds came from behind as if someone, or more than just one person, were following them. They kept going up, leading Bobby to understand this place they were in was underground. A door came into view just ahead, a means of escape. Bobby stepped out, finding himself in the woods. His rescuer had vanished. Had he lost the other boy at some point in their travels? Did the people following them somehow catch the other kid but not Bobby? He didn't have the courage to go back and look. All he could do was run, get as far from this nightmare as he could. It seemed to take forever. Bobby guesstimated he must have been about 50 or 60 miles from his home, but he had no way of knowing. He did manage to get back home. Of course, nobody believed his story. It sounded unbelievable. It sounded like some kid trying to draw attention away from some misdeed, and his story was assigned to the fanciful machinations of youth. Today, Bobby takes people around downtown Portland showing the former locations of the places from his story. He swears it happened just the way he said, but still, a few are willing to believe him. The game Bobby had been playing for so long was called Polybius. Try finding a machine today, and most will tell you that it never existed. There is one guy who claims to have a Polybius machine, but the inner workings are all way too new to have been around back in the 80s. Those people, you know, the fact-checkers and the naysayers, the ones paid to lie about everything, they say the whole Polybius story was just an urban legend. Nothing to see here. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. I believe at one time these fact-checkers might have been telling the truth, way back when they started. Then money began to come in. The sponsors were sending in checks to help keep the facts in check. Big checks started coming in with notes saying, could you say something good about something bad, or maybe say something bad about something good? Here's a check for your troubles. This was soon followed by out-and-out lies to get bigger checks. Money is not the root of all evil. It's the love of money that gets people in the wrong place. To say what happened to Bobby is a lie is understandable. It's a truly unbelievable tale. Those people want us to believe the whole Polybius mind control event never took place. They say the CIA never had any interest in video games, the Polybius machine never existed, and anyone who believes otherwise is crazy or stupid or a conspiracy theorist. And you know what I say about conspiracy theorists? The CIA was very much into mind control. The idea someone would ignore a plausible way to achieve this is what I can't believe. They used drugs, torture, electroshock, and all kinds of ways to reconfigure the mind. Why would they leave out using computers and video games? Why stop with torture and nastiness and not try technology? I did a lot of searching trying to find what is out there. The vast majority of people are either saying the whole thing is an urban legend or it's just based on a movie or a book. The boy who saved Bobby was never described very well, but it was dark. All we know is he looked as if he'd been abused for a long time. What happened to him? I have my theories. Let's say the CIA did kidnap Bobby. Just pretend with me. They did what they wanted, and now it was time to get rid of him or send him back. His mind was now reprogrammed to do whatever it was they thought would be a good idea. The kidnappers could throw him in a car, drive him back home, risk being seen by someone, or they could further confuse his mind by putting in a new player. Some kid who was put through the same mind control experiments, only his mind broke and he became mostly unusable. Let Bobby wander around in the woods while keeping an eye on him. Eventually, Bobby would find his way home with a bit or a lot of help. His story would be too unbelievable. The authorities would figure Bobby got lost in the woods and he imagined the whole thing. This would explain his being missing for a day as well as his unkempt appearance. Then what? And now that the bad guys had fiddled about inside his head, how would they know they had succeeded? A test would have to be conducted at some point. Orders would be sent out either by way of another video game or maybe an electronic signal sent out over the entire city. A broadcast on TV or radio channels, only affecting the target person. It could be something simple like walk outside and check the mailbox at 2 o'clock in the morning. That was Uncas, for those of you that don't know her. She was the last kitten born, so we named her Uncas, after the last of the Mohicans, for those of you that don't read a lot. Bobby was supposed to have attended a tournament where video game enthusiasts all came together to see who was the pinball wizard. Bobby was said to have had a major breakdown while there. No one remembers the tournament or his actions. This could have been just a story sent out to hook those people who believed Bobby, only to throw a wet towel on him after the fact. The tournament might have been made up by the very folks trying to keep us from looking any further. A TV show was made going into the facts and assumptions regarding the Polybius machine and what it was designed to do. The show was a 7-part miniseries called The Polybius Conspiracy. The show's executive producer said it was a hybrid of facts and fiction. The producers investigated the legend and interviewed real people, but to make it more Hollywood, more exciting, they wove in a factual narrative thread throughout with a whole bunch of fiction. As she said, it was still a factual story, only with some fiction to make it more exciting. A typical Hollywood. I used to watch Shark Week each year on the Discovery Channel, right up until they pulled that Megalodon stunt in 2013. The entire show was put out as if it was a real event. The Discovery Channel was supposed to be scientific, true, nature-based channel. Some executive, who was later found with a cardboard sign begging for money, thought it was a good idea to throw in a completely fictitious story to boost ratings. Boy, did it. I understand their ratings dropped by 60%. Too many people look to Hollywood to tell them how the world is. People watch movies and think they know history. Some movies do get close to the truth, and some miss it by a mile. Did the Polybius Game ever even exist? There are some who try to say the entire story is made up. There are many others that remember seeing the machines in arcades here and there. The name Polybius was likely selected specifically as bait for the inquisitive and easily spooked. The original Polybius was an ancient Greek philosopher born around 208 BC in Megalopolis, Arcadia. What a name. He is known for his affinity for cryptography and puzzles, as well as his belief that historians should strictly report what they can verify through hard evidence and by interviewing witnesses. His name itself means many lives in Greek. I was already in my 20s when the game came out. I was more concerned with making a living than playing video games. Seeing kids today in their mid to late 20s still living at home makes me cringe. Sure, I screwed up a lot and I went through life, but today I have tons of mistakes to look back on and do my best to avoid doing again. I did play chess on my computer for a while. I stopped when I found out that the computer was learning how to beat me by making moves way in advance of what I usually would do. Each game was that much harder. The big arcades would bring in a lot of customers. Some had their favorite machine, while others were out to play the latest and greatest games talked about by everyone. The really popular games might have 2 or 3 game consoles. That way folks didn't have to wait. There are stories on how the Polybius machine was only in a few arcades and never more than one per location. As the stories and rumors spread about how much fun and how fantastic the graphics were, people would line up waiting their turn at this often whispered about machine. If some wizard was really good at the game, he or she might stand there at the console for hours, even days, never relinquishing the device to the next person in line. This would get old real quick. Fights would break out as people became anxious to get their hands on the controls. It was almost as if they were being drawn to the machine even without getting the full effects from the screen. Just how technological would a machine need to be to reprogram a brain? I looked up how to brainwash someone. It's on the internet, and I got a lot of answers. The basic way to reprogram someone is by following some not very difficult steps. First, you pick your target. Who do you want to brainwash? Offer them something that they want. Maybe I should put out a warning here. I'm not telling you this on how you can brainwash someone else. I'm telling you this so that if someone else is trying to brainwash you, you'll know what's going on. Let me start over. Offer them something they want. A lot of folks have rather simple wants. Fame, fortune, power. Kind of sums it all up. How would you like to be the most famous video game player ever? We'll put your name in great big letters right across the top of the screen. Just look at how other gamers act when the pinball wizard comes in. I'm using pinball wizard because I don't know what the top gamers are called today. Then make that attention conditional. Make them feel loved and wanted by others. Only the best can win at certain games. Once you make that attention conditional, you tell them that they're only going to get that attention if they do what they're supposed to do. Switch what they want to something bigger. You only thought you wanted fame and fortune. What you really want is to change the world. How do you go about changing the world? Well, you can give out a lot of good or bad advice and hope people will take it. Or you can kill somebody famous. It changes the world. Somebody in power. Somebody that those people want taken out. Criticize who they are in order to start unfreezing their personality. Change their inner thoughts. Separate them from the rest of the world and their past so they become their own, so you become their main source of information. I went through something like this. It's called basic training for the military. That's why things happen the way they do for the first couple of weeks in training. I knew this going in, so it didn't affect me so much as it did some of those clowns. Fellow recruits. Some of the guys in basic with me, it was like, where did they find this guy? I'm not going to go into that right now, but some of them, they haven't evolved yet. Dr. Bucha identified a bizarre phenomena in 1950 when called upon to investigate a series of similar and unexplained helicopter crashes. The pilots who survived reported sudden onset of dizziness and confusion, causing them to lose control of their aircraft. Dr. Bucha found that the helicopter rotor blades, when turning at a certain speed, could cause flashes of sunlight at frequencies coinciding with the electrical frequencies of the central nervous system and our brain waves, inducing symptoms similar to epileptic seizures, including disorientation, nausea, etc. The Bucha effect has been considered as a principle for various forms of less lethal weaponry. There's no such thing as a non-lethal weapon. Someone can get killed by just about anything, including a spitwad. So the proper term is less lethal. If you're watching some TV show and the experts are talking about non-lethal weapons, they're not experts. By flashing lights at various frequencies and brightness, a response inside the brain can be achieved. The CIA would have been interested in finding out everything they could about this means of affecting and possibly rewiring the human brain. You should know what subliminal advertising is. Most people assume it was outlawed years ago. Think again. A subliminal message, getting ahead of myself. Over the years, there have been hundreds of studies showing how decisions making and guiding actions can be affected by flashing messages into people's minds so fast they have no realization anything was done. A subliminal message is a signal or a message designed to pass below the normal limits of perception. It might be inaudible to the conscious mind, but audible to the unconscious, or the inside brain, the deep brain. It might be an image transmitted briefly, unperceived by the conscious mind, yet perceptible by the subconscious. In the everyday world, subliminal techniques are used to advertise and for propaganda purposes. We are being bombarded by subliminal advertising all the time. The term subliminal message was popularized in a 1857 book entitled The Hidden Persuaders by Vance Packard. This book detailed a study of movie theaters that used subliminal commands to increase sales of popcorn and soda at their concession stand. 1973, the book Subliminal Seduction said that subliminal techniques were in wide use in advertising. The book contributed to the general climate of fear with regards to the Orwellian dangers of subliminal messages. Public concern was enough to lead to the Federal Communications Commission, FCC, to hold hearings and to declare subliminal advertising contrary to the public interest because it involved intentional deception of the public. Since the folks who actually make laws never believed this was possible, or they saw it as a benefit to themselves or their party, subliminal advertising was never made illegal. Subliminal messages might gain their potential influence and power from the fact that they may be able to circumvent the critical functions of the conscious mind, and it has often been argued that subliminal suggestions are therefore potentially more powerful than ordinary suggestions. This route to influence our persuasion would be akin to autosuggestion or hypnosis, wherein the subject is encouraged to be, or somehow induced to be, relaxed so that the suggestions are directed to the deeper parts of the mind. Some observers have argued that the unconscious mind is incapable of critical refusal of hypnotic or subliminal suggestions. A form of subliminal messaging involves the insertion of hidden messages into movies and TV programs. The concept of moving pictures relies on persistence of vision to create the illusion of movement in a series of images that are projected at 23 to 30 frames per second. Subliminal messages or subliminal commands can be inserted into these sequences at a rate of 1 frame in 25, or roughly 1 per second. The hidden command in a signal frame will flash across the screen so quickly that it is not consciously perceived, but the command will appeal to the subconscious mind of the viewer and thus have some measurable effect in terms of behavior. A young person standing in front of a video game screen for hours as lights flashed in their eyes might be receiving subliminal messages telling him to do or to remember all kinds of things. It could be planting ideas that could turn him or her into a killing machine when the ghost signal was sent. Years ago, I remember seeing a few newscasts on subliminal advertising. Lots of newspapers covered it as well. It was in just about every magazine out there. The talking heads all covered the same thing. Today, as I searched for information, all the sites were claiming there was no such thing as subliminal advertising. They all say it was just an urban legend. Nothing to see here. The Ministry of Truth has spoken. Did any of you see the Disney movie, The Black Hole? Or do you refuse to admit paying good money to sit there in the dark wondering, what the heck is this garbage? The movie came out after Walter had died. He went into a deep freeze, one of the two. It was a black hole of a movie. It almost bankrupted the Disney company. I think someone was drinking on the job. One of the creative guys locked in the back room had an idea. Make a movie about some guy getting trapped inside a video game. The smart folks on the board of directors, they were all against it. No, that's a bad idea. We won't make that movie. Somehow, Tron was filmed. It was a huge success, and it saved the Disney company. Tron came out in 1982, the year after the Polybius Game hit the arcades. I'm not saying the CIA had anything to do with making the movie, but the board of directors all were against making the movie, yet it got filmed, it got released. The movie would have been conceived and filmed in the 80s or 81. The video game would have been in the works at about the same time. Tron gave video games a huge boost in popularity. Once again, as I was looking for stories of people who played Polybius, I found hundreds of websites all claiming they held the truth, and there was nothing to see here. It was all just a fake story. False news, I think they call it. If you read 1984, you'll know what the Ministry of Truth was and what they did. That is a very depressing book, especially if you hold it up to what's going on today. I did find a few sites that were willing to go against what the fact-checkers were all saying. Around 1981, kids noticed a new game at the Malibu Grand Prix Arcade in Beaverton, Oregon. The word Polybius was on the title screen. During play sessions, the flurry of bright geometric shapes caught their attention. Hours flew by while the kids played this game. After a typical session, they would experience nightmares, hallucinations, headaches, memory loss, intrusive self-harm ideation. Despite the symptoms, many returned the next day to play the same game again, almost as if they were addicted to it. Kids soon began to fight each other to play the Polybius first. Between breaks, certain people noticed how black-clad men fiddled with the specific arcade machine, mainly the Polybius machine. Weeks after its debut, eager players returned to the Malibu Grand Prix Arcade, only to find a vacant spot where the game used to sit. One story I found goes as follows. The Stanislawson Company was contracted to create the game in 1980. After the development phase, the game got a limited release. Shortly after it hit a few arcades, a 13-year-old boy from Lloyd District, Portland, suffered an epileptic fit while playing the game. Stanislawson means sense deletion in German. At least that's what it said on the computer. If you're in Germany listening to the show and I got it wrong, let me know. But that's what I was told. When huge companies roll out new products, they do a risk evaluation. They're not looking for the possibility somebody might get sick or killed. They're looking for the percentage of damage that could lead to a lawsuit. How much will they make as opposed to how much will they lose in court? If you make $1 million with your product and then you lose $1 million in court, that's not a good idea. If you make $1 billion with your product and then you lose $1 million in court, well, you're still so far ahead in the game that a lot of these big companies are willing to take the risk with our lives. November 29th, 1981, a 12-year-old boy was playing asteroids in a Portland, Oregon. He was on a mission to break the official high score. After 28 hours of non-stop play, drinking way too much soda, Brian began to develop anxiety and intense nausea. Now I gotta ask, how did he go to the bathroom? You drink that much soda over a 28-hour period, you're gonna have to go. And in public? Oh, I hope he didn't just all over the front of the machine. Some parents began to call for restrictions on video games. Others looked at the story and thought that boy needed a balanced diet and some new hobbies. Michael Lopez played Tempest at the same arcade on the same day. After hours of play, he began to feel a weird sensation at the back of his head. He soon became so sick he stumbled outside and lost his lunch, as well as his breakfast and maybe some of yesterday's food as well. Michael managed to get to his feet and began walking home. 4 blocks from his house, he collapsed and began screaming in pain. He said it felt like his head was going to explode. He was rushed to the hospital. Once he recovered, he was released, but he says he still has intense headaches even today. All that from playing a video game. In the early 80s, the FBI began monitoring arcades in the Portland area. Some arcade owners were handing out cash prizes to the players, and the authorities thought that this was way too much like gambling. To add to this, these venues had also gained a reputation for crime, drug use, violence, pickpockets, things like that. The FBI rigged Galaxian, Scramble, and Tempest arcade cabinets with microphones and cameras so they could record evidence of illegal activities. In 1981, 10 days after the Lopez and Mauro incidents, law enforcement agencies raided Portland arcades. They seized rigged arcade cabinets and money during this attack. How much of this activity was conducted to catch criminals, and how much was used to catch unsuspecting patsies for future covert activity? American and British intelligence organizations have infiltrated the fantasy world of World of Warcraft and Second Life. I've never heard of Second Life, but I've heard of the World of Warcraft. They've been conducting surveillance and gathering data about the online games played by millions of people around the world. This came to light from newly disclosed classified documents. These intel groups claim that they feared that terrorists or criminal networks could use the games to communicate secretly, move money, or plot attacks. No one had the slightest idea that the Boston Marathon bombers were about to kill 3 people and injure 280. The intel folks had spent too much time looking at video game players, UFO groups, and conspiracy theorist researchers, and apparently they were ignoring the real action. At least that's the way I see it. The spies had created make-believe characters so they could snoop about and try to recruit informers, while also collecting data and contents of communications between players, according to the documents disclosed by the former NSA contractor Edward Snowden. Because militants often rely on features common to video games like fake IDs, voice and text chats, a way to conduct financial transactions, American and British intelligence agencies worried that they might be operating inside video games. U.S. and British intelligence agencies, including the CIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and the British government's communications headquarters, have operated in virtual worlds and gaming communities to snoop and try to recruit informants. For example, according to Snowden's documents, the U.S. has conducted spy operations in Second Life, where players create human avatars to socialize buy and sell goods, and explore exotic virtual destinations. Next time you hook up with a girlfriend or a boyfriend on one of these video games, you just might have a spy as a friend. The NSA and the GCHQ have collected data or player communications from the World of Warcraft, Second Life, and Xbox Live systems, raising questions about the legality of virtual surveillance. One document revealed that while GCHQ was testing its ability to spy on Second Life, the agency vacuumed up 3 days' worth of Second Life chat, instant message, and financial transaction data, totaling 176,677 lines of data. The virtual surveillance data back in 2008, after the NSA and the intelligence agencies began to worry that terrorist groups would use games to communicate and plot real attacks. At an intelligence conference that year, researchers outlined a fictitious scenario where terrorists took the World of Warcraft to plot an attack on the White House. But there is no evidence that terror groups view the games as anything but games. With the dark web out there running unimpeded by any government agencies, why use video games to pass secret plans or plot terrorist activity? The dark web provides anonymity by keeping all communications private. This happens due to encryption and routing content through multiple web servers to keep its true origins hidden. Accessing the dark web requires software that keeps things anonymous. And the term dark web is a nod to the fact that things are hidden and secretive. At least one spy agency, Britain's GCHQ, purchased advertising in Microsoft's Xbox Live system to recruit gamers for careers for Her Majesty's government. The in-game video ad features cinematic graphics, a James Bond-type agent, and a series of would-be terrorist attacks. In a 3-year project started in 2009, an intelligence research office awarded several multi-million-dollar contracts to study how players' identities in virtual world might be linked to their real-world identities. One team produced a study of World of Warcraft, finding younger players and male players preferred competitive hack-and-slash activities, and older and female players preferred non-combat activities. In other words, the wizard that you're looking at might be some young woman or it might be some old guy. Have you been to a comic convention or a cosplay event? If you have, you'll know what I'm getting at. The folks who like to pretend they are people or things that they are not don't make really good soldiers or spies. I'm sure there are a few who might, but most are wrapped up in a fantasy world where things can happen that are impossible here in ours. There's nothing wrong with this. I've sold my books at several events like this. The people dressing up are interesting to talk to. Some put hundreds, even thousands of dollars into their outfits. They join groups who have some rather stringent rules. They must look the part and act it as well. What you will get by recruiting these folks is very good hand-eye coordination. These are the kids who will dominate the battlefield from the rear, controlling drones and automations. Spies have to be able to interact with others. They have to have the ability to convince people face to face that they are who they aren't. The top secret 2008 NSA document said video games had the potential to be a target-rich communication network, allowing the intelligence suspects a way to hide in plain sight. Virtual games are an opportunity. So many CIA, FBI, Pentagon spies were hunting around in Second Life, a deconfliction group had to be formed to avoid collisions. Deconfliction groups are used to look into targets of investigations to be sure that no other group is looking into them as well, and that the group is actually an organization and not a government-formed bunch to try attracting those with criminal intent. If the FBI discovers there's a group of potential terrorists that they want to investigate, they would look real bad if they found out that this was a CIA sting operation. And it has happened all the time. The documents do not cite any counter-terrorist successes from the efforts, and former American intelligence officials, current and former gaming company employees, and outside experts said in interviews that they knew of little evidence that terrorist groups viewed the games as having any communication or plotting operations significance whatsoever. The surveillance, which also included Microsoft's Xbox Live, could raise privacy concerns. It is not clear exactly how the agencies got access to gamers' data or communications, how many players may have been monitored, or whether American communications or activities were captured. The Fourth Amendment to our Constitution says, "The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable search and seizure shall not be violated, and no warrant shall be issued but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the person or things to be seized." A computer sitting inside a private home is covered by this rule. The government probing private property looking for potential violations is a direct violation of this amendment. One American company, the makers of the World of Warcraft, said that neither the NSA nor its British counterpart had gotten permission to gather intelligence inside their game. Many players are Americans who can be targeted for surveillance only with approval from the nation's secret intelligence court. Did you know there's a secret intelligence court? The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court was established by Congress in 1978. The court entertains applications made by the United States government for approval of electronic surveillance, physical search, and certain other forms of investigative actions for foreign intelligence purposes. A government communications headquarters spokesperson would neither confirm nor deny any involvement by that agency in gaming surveillance, but said that it was conducting under strict legal and policy framework with rigorous oversight. The NSA spokeswoman declined to comment. According to American officials and documents that Mr. Snowden provided to The Guardian, which shared them with the New York Times and other companies, spy agencies grew worried that terrorist groups might take to the virtual world to establish safe communication channels. 2008 NSA document titled "Exploiting Terrorists' Use of Games and Virtual Environments," the agency said that terrorist target selectors, which could be a computer's Internet Protocol address or an email account, have been found associated with Xbox Live, Second Life, World of Warcraft, and other games. But the document does not present any evidence that terrorists were participating in the games. Still, the intelligence agencies found other benefits in infiltrating these online worlds. According to the minutes of a January 2009 meeting, Network Gaming Exploitation Team had identified engineers, embassy drivers, scientists, and other foreign intelligence operatives to be World of Warcraft players, potential targets for recruitment as agents. In other words, government employees were playing video games. It sounds like they're saying if you work for the government, you should look into other forms of entertainment and stay away from those video games. The Supreme Court has attempted to clarify the meaning of the term probable cause on several occasions, while recognizing that probable cause is a concept that is imprecise, fluid, and very dependent on context. When I had a job, if I saw a vehicle coming from the river, and it was sitting low to the ground, this was my probable cause to stop them and have a look. They're coming from the river. The vehicle is loaded down with something or someone. I had to be able to verbalize why I stopped the vehicle in an intelligent manner. I couldn't just say, "It looks suspicious." I had to explain in an intelligent manner why I'd made the stop. The Fourth Amendment prevented me from stopping any vehicle just because I wanted to see if they were breaking the law. The intel agencies are sneaky looking into people's private lives, poking around in their computers looking for evidence of criminal activity. They have no probable cause. They're violating the Fourth Amendment, but it's for our own good, so that makes it okay. At age 17, Anthony Rosner of London, England, was a hero of the World of Warcraft online gaming community. He built empires, led raids, and submerged himself in the fantasy world that seemingly fulfilled his every need. Meanwhile, his real life was virtually non-existent. Come here, you. Cats. In case you hadn't figured it out already, I have cats. He neglected his schoolwork, his relationships, his health, and his hygiene. He was becoming a stinky game player. He said, "I never saw my real friends. I gained weight, became lazy, and spent nearly all my time slumped over my computer." He played up to 18 hours a day, every day, for nearly 2 years. Rosner really nearly threw away a university degree in pursuit of games. According to a study by NPD Group, a global marketing research firm, his gaming obsession isn't unique. 9 out of 10 children play video games. That's 64 million kids, and some of them hit the keyboards or the smartphone before they can even string together a sentence. The problem, many researchers believe that excessive gaming between age 21 and 22 can physically rewire the brain. Researchers in China performing magnetic resonance imaging studies on brains of 18 college students who spent an average of 10 hours a day online playing video games, compared with a control group who spent less than 2 hours a day online, the gamers had less gray matter. That's the thinking part of the brain. As far back as the early 1990s, scientists warned that because video games only stimulated brains that stimulated brain regions that control vision and movement, other parts of the mind responsible for behavior, emotion, and learning could become underdeveloped. The dopamine release that comes from gaming is so powerful, say researchers, it can almost shut the prefrontal regions down. That's one reason why gamers like Rosner can play for 18 hours straight. Kids plop themselves in front of a computer and they can stay there for hours. What does all this have to do with the Polybius game? All these alphabet agencies are almost fanatically involved in what's going on in video game world. They're spending a lot of our tax dollars to look into things that, as far as I can see, don't involve our security whatsoever. Thinking the CIA would stand back and not look into ways that the video game society could benefit them is like saying a politician would not accept a gift from some shady organization. They used drugs, hypnosis, electroshock, torture. You imagine it, they used it, all trying to get ahead in the mind control game between us and those commies. You know, those people on the other side of the planet. As Terry Pratchett said, the leopard doesn't change his shorts. You don't read Terry Pratchett, you don't know what you're missing. I reached out to Christopher Garetano, and he told me that he thinks there is something to the story of the Polybius games. He could never find an actual machine, but he did talk to the co-founders of Atari and other game engineers, and they confirmed not only the government's involvement in games, but also the development of things that will communicate with the brain in virtual reality. It sounds like the CIA was messing with people's brains at one time, but I can't say for sure that it actually did or didn't happen. It's up to you to decide. Check out Christopher Garetano's YouTube channel. You'll learn a lot of interesting things. And it's pretty exciting. He's a lot more exciting to watch than I am. It's not for young minds. Don't forget to check out my book reading channel, Storytime with Chris James. Christmas is right around the corner. Books make great gifts. Books make great gifts. They're easy to wrap, they don't break if you drop them, and you don't need batteries. Plus, if the person that gets a book for a Christmas present decides they don't like the book, they can rewrap it and give it to someone else. Who knows, you might get your book back someday. You can find my books at Amazon.com or at the Organic Man Coffee Trike here in Laredo. Until next Saturday, this is Chris James for Strange Things.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man, they say murder 3? Strange things that happen here, how stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree?